In this interview, former US National Security Advisor John Bolton shares his concerns about Donald Trump's foreign policies, a must-watch for anyone following global security issues.
It's shameful, really. It threatens the NATO alliance. It puts the United States on the wrong side of aggression in this war. I think it shows just how difficult it will be for Ukraine to get a decent settlement of this conflict if we're going to have negotiation. I'm very worried about it. I'm also worried about the difficulty that the West as a whole will have once Trump's gone. And although it seems like a long time, he's only got 47 months left to how to put the West back together again. And I think the U.S. will have a lot of work to do to convince people that our word is good and that we are actually a nation of normal people again. So I hope in the meantime, Europeans don't get obsessed with just being European. The threats that we face around the world are threats to the West as a whole, coming primarily in the rest of the century from China and the China-Russia axis, which is developing. So this is not going to be an easy period for Europeans. It's not going to be an easy period for a very substantial number of people in America. I don't think Trump's vote in the United Nations represents more than a fraction of the voters in this country. I don't think people realize that by electing Donald Trump, we'd be voting with Russia in the UN. And I think these things have effects. I wish the negative effects on Trump's popularity were moving more quickly, but I think they are happening. Trump has said many times he believes if he has good relations with the head of a foreign country, then relations between the U.S. and that country are good. Now, I would never say personal relations are irrelevant, even in international affairs, but they don't dictate the sum total of the relationship, especially when you're dealing with somebody as cold-blooded as Vladimir Putin. You know, his fascination with authoritarian figures, I think, is because he sees them as big guys, decisive. They're strong people, and he wants to be like them. And I would say there's something wrong with somebody who's president of the United States who thinks they have to compare themselves to anybody else. Well, I think it's very serious, and it's a huge mistake for the United States and for the West as a whole. And you can see by the comments that he's made, by the actions the United States has taken, voting in the United Nations against a resolution condemning Russian aggression, U.S. voting alongside Russia, North Korea, Belarus. Even China didn't vote with Russia. They abstained on that resolution. So we're on the opposite side of the NATO alliance as a whole. And it's bad news for Ukraine, bad news for Ukraine's prospects, but bad news for NATO too, as he consistently drives wedges between the United States and its allies. And I don't see that diminishing. I've said for quite some time I'm very worried that Trump would completely withdraw the United States from NATO. He came close to it in 2018. He might well do it this time, or he might take steps that so weaken NATO that by the time he actually withdrew, it would just be a formality. Well, there's no doubt Europe should be doing more. Britain has really been in the lead within Europe. Germany and others in what Donald Rumsfeld called old Europe really have not. Poland, the Baltic republics have been very forthcoming in helping Ukraine. But, the real question is, what's in America's interest? And it's been in our interest for a long time to have peace and stability in Europe for economic reasons, for our own security. That's what we get out of the NATO alliance. And it's not something you can say, well, we'll let the Europeans do it. And if they fail or if Ukraine fails, we don't care. We do care. If Russia comes to dominate Ukraine, it poses a bigger threat elsewhere in Europe to countries that are NATO members, to our economic interests, to a whole range of political and military interests. The world's a complicated place. Donald Trump doesn't get the complications. Europe's right there with Ukraine, so it's Europe's problem. Sounds easy and straightforward. It's just completely wrong. Plenty of people in the United States, many in Congress, an overwhelming majority in both parties, and people inside Trump's administration who won't be saying it publicly, but who know that NATO has been a very successful alliance and that it'd be foolhardy to give it up. Unfortunately, they don't include Trump in their number, but to simply say at this point, because of what Trump is doing on Ukraine, we're going to conclude the worst will happen and there's no way to fix it. once you go down that road, it's very hard to come back. So I'm not offering a completely clear path here because we're in uncharted territory. But I do think the wrong path is to say you can't ever count on the United States again. That's not where the overwhelming majority of our citizens are. I think you can see signs of it. I wish there were more. I do live in reality. But I think it's starting in a variety of fronts, and I think the vote in the UN with Russia and North Korea, even China abstained on that vote. And many, many other things that are happening mean that even within the Republican Party, although much of it in Congress is intimidated, more and more people are speaking out. A lot more needs to happen, but there are early signs, finally, that it is happening. People to understand that Trump is a problem across the board. It's not each individual thing he does that's a problem. It's that Trump himself is the problem. So he's going to cause considerable damage. There's no doubt about it. So the effort has to be to mitigate the damage and then correct it as quickly as we can when he's gone. Well, I think they've followed the war in Ukraine from the time it started, and especially now watching Trump. I think Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un all believe that they know how to manipulate Trump. They know he doesn't know very much. He doesn't care to know very much. He cares only about personal relations. He thinks everything in life is just another deal to be made. He doesn't have a grand strategy. He doesn't have a philosophy. He doesn't really even do policy. They're considering how they're going to take advantage of Trump in office, as they've seen Vladimir Putin take advantage of him by flattery and by releasing an American hostage, then having Belarus release an American hostage. This is the way that Putin is able to manipulate Trump, and I think Xi and Kim both think they can do it too. I don't think he's fit to be president now. He doesn't have the basic knowledge that presidents have to have. He has no interest in learning, and he doesn't read any briefing papers or anything like that. So, whether he's declined or not, he's not up to the job. But that doesn't bother his supporters, unfortunately. And I think it's one of the reasons why he's such an easy mark for people like Vladimir Putin, who know how to manipulate him, and he doesn't even realize he's being manipulated. He said of Kim Jong-un of North Korea, we fell in love. Well, I can guarantee you that's not what Kim Jong-un thinks. But it's a way for them to get what they want out of Trump while he's trying to make sure that he doesn't disrupt the friendship that he thinks he has with him.